3:17 a.m. The clock on the nightstand glows like it's mocking me. I know because I've been staring at it for the last 43 minutes. The room is so quiet I can hear my own heartbeat, and that half-empty cup of coffee from yesterday afternoon is still sitting on the desk, cold and forgotten, like every prayer I've whispered this month. Third rejection email. Third one in 4 weeks. I read it at 2:34 a.m. because apparently that's when my brain decides to check inboxes now. We regret to inform you, the polite, corporate way of saying you're not enough. Again. And here's the thing nobody tells you about waiting on God. It's not the waiting itself that breaks you. It's the silence. The ceiling prayers. The ones you whisper at 3 a.m. when the house is dark and your spouse is asleep and you're sitting there wondering if heaven even has reception anymore. You ever been there? I mean really been there, where you've done everything right, you've trusted, you've tithed, you've showed up, you've declared verses over your life, and still, crickets? I'm not a pastor. I'm not a theologian. I'm just a person who cried in a parking lot last Tuesday after work because I couldn't face walking into my apartment one more time pretending I wasn't falling apart. It was 6:15 p.m., the sun was setting over a nearly empty lot, and I sat in my car with the engine off and just wept. Not the pretty kind. The ugly kind. The kind where you're asking God questions you never thought you'd ask out loud. Do you even see me? Do you remember my name? Because it feels like you've moved on to someone else's prayers and left mine in some heavenly voicemail box. Monday morning. The light through the curtains is weak, gray, the kind of light that doesn't even try. The clock on the wall ticks like it's counting down something I can't see. I've got my Bible open to the Psalms because someone told me that's where you go when you're desperate, but honestly, the words are just ink on paper right now. I can't feel them. I can't taste them. I'm just staring at the page, empty, hollow, wondering if faith is supposed to feel this much like nothing. And then, I don't even know where it came from, I heard myself say it out loud. Not a shout. Not a declaration. Just a broken whisper through tears I didn't even realize were falling. Delay doesn't mean rejection. I said it. But I didn't believe it. Not yet. You see, here's what I was learning in that moment, even though I couldn't fully grasp it, God's silence is not his absence. I know that sounds like a church cliché. I used to roll my eyes at lines like that. But when you're the one sitting in the silence, when you're the one holding the rejection emails, when you're the one whose plans have collapsed 3 times in a single month, you start to realize that clichés are sometimes just truths you haven't suffered enough to understand yet. Let me tell you about something that happened 2 years ago. I almost signed a contract. Almost. The pen was practically in my hand. It was a dream opportunity, or at least it looked like one. Good money. Prestige. The kind of thing you post about on LinkedIn with a humble brag and a "so grateful" caption. And then, 48 hours before signing, the whole thing fell apart. No explanation. Just, gone. I was devastated. I questioned God. I questioned myself. I wondered what I had done wrong, what sin I needed to repent of, what lesson I was supposed to be learning. And then 6 months later, that company filed for bankruptcy. Complete collapse. Everyone who had signed that contract was out of a job within 90 days, and some of them never recovered financially. I didn't see it then. I couldn't see it. Because when God closes a door, he doesn't always hand you a blueprint of the alternative. Sometimes he just closes it. And you're left standing in the hallway of confusion, staring at a locked door, wondering if you've been abandoned. But what if, and this is the thought that hit me that Monday morning, what if every closed door is actually a wall of protection? What if the delay is the deliverance? What if the "no" is actually a "not yet," and a "not yet" is actually a "I love you too much to let you walk into what I see coming." Here's your mirror moment. I need you to hear this. Right now, wherever you are, maybe you're in your car, maybe you're in your kitchen, maybe you're lying in bed at 3:17 a.m. with your own cold coffee and your own ceiling prayers. Have you ever felt like God forgot your name? Have you ever looked at your circumstances and thought, if He really loved me, He wouldn't let this happen? Have you ever scrolled through social media watching everyone else get their breakthroughs while you're still waiting, still hoping, still pretending you're not slowly losing faith? I have. And I'm telling you this not as someone who has it all figured out, but as someone who is still in the hallway. Still waiting. Still learning that the silence of God is not the absence of God. He knows your name. He knows the number of hairs on your head. He knows about the email. He knows about the parking lot. He knows about the tears you haven't told anyone about. And He has not forgotten you. Here's your memorable truth for today. Write it down. Tattoo it on your heart. God's silence is not His absence. It's often His preparation. I'm learning that the delays, the closed doors, the "we regret to inform you" emails, they're not proof that God has abandoned the plan. They're proof that He's protecting it. He's pruning it. He's preparing something that you don't have the capacity to carry yet. And I know that doesn't make the waiting easier. I know it doesn't pay the bills. I know it doesn't answer the 3 a.m. questions. But it does something else. It shifts your perspective just enough to keep you from giving up completely. It gives you just enough hope to whisper one more prayer. To open the Bible one more time. To get out of the car and walk into the apartment one more night. But that morning, something shifted. I wish I could tell you it was dramatic, a lightning bolt, a voice from heaven, a sudden check in the mail. It wasn't. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of shift that happens when you're too exhausted to fight anymore and you just open the Bible. Not because you're holy. Because you're desperate. I opened to the book of Revelation. Chapter 3. Verse 8. And I read these words, "I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut." POV, you're sitting in your living room at 9:42 a.m. on a Monday, and you suddenly realize you've been gaslighting yourself with Scripture. You've been treating God's promises like a rewards program: swipe your faith card, earn your breakthrough. And when the points don't add up, you start to wonder if the whole system is broken. But here's what pierced through the fog that morning. The verse doesn't say, "I have set before you every door you want." It says, "I have set before you an open door." Singular. Specific. And the one who opens it is not me, with my striving and my networking and my desperate attempts to pry open what God has closed. The one who opens it is Him. And the door He opens? No one, not the economy, not the hiring manager, not the landlord, not the doctor, not your own fear, no one can shut it. Mirror moment. Right now, is there a door you've been trying to force open? A relationship? A job? A timeline? An expectation? Have you been pushing so hard against something that your hands are bleeding and your faith is bruised? And have you ever considered, I mean really considered, that the reason it won't budge is not because God is punishing you, but because He is protecting you? I had to drive to the hospital that afternoon. My uncle was waiting for test results. The kind of tests where the waiting itself feels like a diagnosis. And I sat in that hospital waiting room, you know the kind. Beige walls. Plastic chairs. A television mounted in a corner playing a muted news channel no one is watching. The smell of antiseptic and anxiety. And I watched people check their phones. Check the clock. Check their phones again. Everyone waiting. Everyone suspended in that terrible in-between where nothing is happening and everything is at stake. And that's when the lesson landed. The waiting room is not a punishment. It's a preparation. See, if God had opened that door I wanted 6 months ago, the dream job, the financial security, the thing I was so certain was my destiny, I would have walked through it completely unprepared. I would have been the person who got the opportunity but didn't have the character to sustain it. I would have crumbled under the pressure because I hadn't yet learned that provision is not the same thing as presence. I hadn't yet learned that a full bank account and an empty soul is still poverty. The delay was not denial. The delay was development. Psalm 5 verse 12 tells us the Lord blesses the righteous and surrounds them with favor as with a shield. For years, I defined favor in shallow terms: a promotion, a surprise check in the mail, the exact outcome I had prayed for arriving right on schedule. But sitting in that hospital waiting room, watching my uncle quietly scroll through his phone with a peace that had no earthly explanation, the definition cracked open. I remembered the winter my marriage was unraveling, and I couldn't pray anything except help. No money appeared. No dramatic breakthrough. Instead, a friend showed up uninvited with a pot of soup and sat on my couch in silence until I could breathe again. That was favor. Not the rescue I demanded, but the companionship I desperately needed. Favor is not always the thing you receive. Sometimes favor is the strength you didn't know you had. Sometimes favor is the peace that doesn't make sense. Sometimes favor is the ability to sit in a plastic chair in a beige room and not fall apart. Memorable truth: a closed door is not rejection. It's redirection wrapped in protection. And here's the question that started to form in my mind, the question that began to turn my confusion into curiosity and my despair into a fragile, flickering hope. What if the door hasn't opened yet because God is protecting you from something you can't see? What if the thing you're begging Him to give you would actually destroy you? What if His silence is not abandonment, it's armor? I started to think about all the times in Scripture when waiting preceded breakthrough. Joseph in prison. David in caves. Abraham staring at the stars, decades before the promise was born. None of them got what they wanted on their timeline. But none of them were forgotten. And none of their waiting was wasted. Here's your mirror moment, and I need you to stay with me. Maybe you're in a waiting room right now, literally or metaphorically. Maybe it's a hospital. Maybe it's a marriage that's barely breathing. Maybe it's a career that's going nowhere. Maybe it's a dream you've buried so deep you're afraid to even pray about it anymore. And maybe you've been telling yourself that God has forgotten you. That He's busy with other people's miracles. That your name got lost in the shuffle. But what if the delay is the evidence of His love? What if He cares too much to let you walk through a door that leads to a cliff? What if the closed door is actually a shield? And then, this is the part I'm still processing, I realized that while I was waiting for God to open a door, He was waiting for me to do something else entirely. Not to try harder. Not to network more. Not to send another email or make another phone call or post another desperate prayer on social media. The thing He wanted me to do in the waiting was so simple I almost missed it. And it changed everything. Because the breakthrough I was looking for wasn't on the other side of a door. It was in the hallway. And what God wanted from me in that hallway wasn't my striving. It was my surrender. Not my plan B. Not my backup strategy. Not my anxious attempts to control what I couldn't control. He wanted me to stop trying to open the door. And start trusting the one who holds the key. Section hook. You see, while I was staring at that closed door, begging God to break it down, He was whispering something I almost missed. He wasn't asking me to try harder. He wasn't asking me to send another email or make another phone call or post another desperate prayer on social media. He was asking me to stop trying to be the door opener and start trusting the one who already opened it before I even knocked. Revelation 3 verse 8, I'd read it 100 times, but that morning in my apartment, with cold coffee and a heart that had finally stopped fighting, the words hit different. I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. Not, I will set. Not, I might set if you perform well enough. Past tense. Already done. The door was open. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy trying to kick down the wrong one. And here's the mirror moment I need you to sit in for a second. How many of us are exhausted not because God isn't moving, but because we've been trying to do His job? How many sleepless nights have you spent trying to control outcomes that were never yours to control? How many times have you begged God to open a door He already opened? You just didn't recognize the doorway because it didn't look the way you expected. So I want to invite you to do something that might feel strange. So in the comments, I want you to write this with sincerity. Not as a wish. Not as a desperate attempt to convince God. But as a prophetic act of trust. Write, I receive God's favor and I trust His timing this week. Type it out. Let it be more than a sentence on a screen. Let it be the posture of your heart. And if you're in a place where you can't even type those words because you're so tired, so disappointed, so afraid that God has forgotten you, type, I'm trying to trust. That's enough. He can work with that. He's not intimidated by your doubt. He's not scared of your questions. A faith that's limping is still faith. And now I want to pray for you. Not a polished prayer. Not a prayer that pretends everything is fine. A real one. Because I've been where you are. I know what it's like to pray through clenched teeth. I know what it's like to open your mouth and have nothing come out but tears. Father, I come before you right now, and I'm not going to pretend I have it all together. I don't. The person listening right now, they're tired. Some of them are barely holding on. Some of them smiled at their kids this morning while fighting back panic. Some of them walked into work carrying a weight no one can see. Lord, I bring them to you. Not their polished version. The real one. The one who's been disappointed. The one who's starting to wonder if prayer even works. The one who's been waiting so long they've forgotten what hope feels like. Father, meet them in that place. Not with judgment. Not with a lecture. With presence. With peace that doesn't make sense. With a door they didn't see coming. I pray for the person waiting on a job. The interview that went nowhere. The promotion that went to someone else. The business that's barely surviving. Father, open the right door and give them the discernment to know it's you. I pray for the person in a relationship that's falling apart. The marriage that feels like a roommate situation. The friendship that's gone cold. The family member they haven't spoken to in years. Lord, you're the God of reconciliation. Do what only you can do. I pray for the person whose body is breaking down. The chronic pain. The diagnosis they're afraid to Google. The fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. Father, you knit their body together. You know every cell. Bring healing in your way, in your time. And I pray for the person whose bank account is empty. The bills stacked on the counter. The anxiety that hits every time the phone rings because it might be another collector. Jehovah Jireh, you are still the God who provides. Not always in the way we expect. Not always on our timeline. But always. Make a way where there is no way. Mirror moment, Lord, I don't need to understand the whole plan. I just need to know you're holding it. That's it. That's the prayer. Not, explain yourself to me, God. Not, give me a roadmap for the next 5 years. Just, hold it. Hold me. Hold this situation. Because if you're holding it, I can breathe. If you're holding it, I can sleep tonight. If you're holding it, the outcome is not dependent on my ability to figure everything out. So here's the practical application, and I need you to really hear this. This week, I want you to practice the discipline of surrender. Not passive resignation, that's different. Surrender is active. Surrender is waking up every morning and saying, God, I'm not going to try to control what only you can control today. I'm going to do what you've given me to do, and I'm going to trust you with the results. That means you stop comparing your journey to someone else's highlight reel. You stop looking at their open door and resenting your closed one. You have no idea what's behind their door. You have no idea what God is protecting you from. Comparison is just another form of control, and control is the enemy of trust. This week, every time you feel the anxiety rising, when you want to send that follow-up email for the third time, when you want to check your bank account again, when you want to manipulate the situation to force an outcome, pause. Breathe. And say this out loud: God's timing is not my timing, and His favor is not dependent on my striving. Memorable truth: God's favor doesn't always come wrapped in the package you expected. Sometimes it comes as peace in the middle of chaos. Sometimes it comes as strength when you should have broken. Sometimes it comes as a closed door that saved your life. Don't miss the favor because you're fixated on the form you thought it would take. And that's the lesson I carry now, the one I couldn't see back then. I find myself mentally standing in my old apartment again, years after I moved out. The air feels heavy with everything I didn't understand at the time. The clock on the wall ticked through countless empty afternoons I once resented, but now I realize those quiet hours were shaping something deeper in my soul. God was working in ways I couldn't perceive, turning my solitude into a sanctuary where His presence could finally reach me.